And welcome. Today's webinar is on how to ruin a great strategy quickly. Now, we're going to talk about the 5 logical choices. These are things that all of us do. We see it every day. We see it in ourselves. We see it on each other. And these things have a counterintuitive effect of undermining great strategic choices. But we also need to talk about what to do instead. So we're gonna have some fun ideas here. I got some great stories. I look forward to your questions, but let's go ahead and get ourselves started. All right. Oops, sorry. All right. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Stimson, president of Stimson Group. There's all my vitals. You can learn all about me at trstimson.com or LinkedIn or wherever it is that you like to get information from. If we haven't met before, please, I'll talk more about what to do, how to reach out to me at the end of the webinar. I'd love to meet you. Sponsors, sponsor update today. We've added a new sponsor, Layard, who manufactures the Planar products. They're going to join us at our Jumpstart workshop next month. I'll talk more about that later. And as always, thank you to AV Franklin, HireTrack, Lasso, Flex, Square AV, and Avixa. There's room for more sponsors, and we're talking to quite a few more folks. And if you are interested, please do reach out to us. Now, why this webinar today? Well, it's a strategy webinar, and we've got a strategy workshop coming up, so we can make that connection there. But why this particular webinar? And why are we talking about the things that we do to undermine strategy? For me, the essence of strategy is innovation. It's how can I find innovation? It's where do we find that uniqueness? How do we create something special and leverage that to our growth and profitability? How do we benefit customers in unique and different ways? And innovation is a very important part of this. And a lot of the things that we mistakenly do undermine innovations that we have. So I want to talk about those in some detail today. Now, innovation, it's about 80% clever and 20% luck. We can work and learn and practice being innovative. We can use our cleverness skills. We can improve on those things. We can learn how to think strategically more often and maybe at appropriate times. But to really hit one home, to really find something that's awesome, there's a lot of luck involved. So we can have a lot of great ideas and innovations, but they're not all going to be home runs. Okay? Doesn't mean that we still don't want to do them. Now, we can increase our odds for finding a clever idea by reducing the tendencies to settle for mediocre ones. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. You already have great ideas. I see it all the time. But then we turn around and do things that undermine the value of those great ideas. So here are the 5 missteps, and we'll talk about these in depth in order. Copying a brilliant idea. You know, the idea that somebody else came up with a brilliant idea, I can copy that and maybe ride their coattails a little bit, you know, try and mimic some of their success. I might be better off than where I am right now, okay? But when we miss the whole point of the exercise. So we'll talk about that and what to do instead. Coming to the best decision possible. You know, all that time and energy we spend trying to figure out how can we make the best decision. This is really important. This is very critical. We spend too much time on that, and therefore we don't actually get to any decision at all. Buy-in, waiting for buy-in. I've had a lot of conversations in the past 2 months about buy-in and consensus. We're going to talk about why this is a misstep and what this does to undermine your innovation. Trusting your gut. Looking at this list of people who are here today, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of people who have been very successful because they've trusted their gut. But trusting your gut is also one of the things that we do that undermines our effectiveness in innovation. We'll talk about that. And then best ideas. And I am really guilty of this. I come up with a lot of great ideas, and sometimes I think, man, that's the best idea I've had in a long time. I want to put a lot of time and energy into that. And, you know, that's the wrong reason. We fall in love with our ideas, and this is something we have to be very careful about. So let's talk about these missteps, and let's talk about what we might do instead. Okay? Now, brilliant ideas. Okay? All brilliant ideas are original. When you copy somebody else's idea, it's no longer original. So you lose that brilliance. So if you copy, you miss the chance to be special. So therefore, you put your best ideas out where everybody can see them. So let's think about this. When it comes to strategy, being unique has the added value for both you and the person you're trying to benefit. Right? Let's think about first impressions. This is not a good time for a speed dating metaphor, but our grandmother, our mothers taught us that, make a good first impression, comb your hair, button your shirt, pull up your pants and go in and make a good first impression. Our strategy should always be to make a good first impression. Okay. And when we do that, what we want to put out there, if we want to impress someone, besides not unimpressing them with our first impression, if we want to impress them, then we have to have something unique and special about us be presented. Now, for some people, this is style. This is how they dress. This is how they carry themselves. For other people, it's how they introduce themselves, how they comb their hair, how they color their hair. There's a lot of things that we can do as individuals to change that first impression. How do we meet people? How are they going to remember us? Why are they going to think that we're special? Your first impression, the value of meeting you should be self-evident when you first meet someone. And the same thing applies in strategy. So when you're thinking of innovative ways to be unique, remember it has to have value, not just for you, but it has to have value for the other person. Our goal is always to exceed expectations in some way. If I'm going to come up with a great innovation, I want it to be something better than what people thought of themselves. When I meet somebody for the first time, I want to be more valuable to them than they were expecting. So when we work on all of the different qualities of expectations, and I'm not going to go into the chart here because that's not what's important. What's important is that if you copy, you miss the chance to be special. Now, the other problem with this is that if you put your special out there, many of us are afraid that somebody's going to steal our special, that they're going to copy us. And my advice to you is let them. Put your best stuff out there. Defy others to copy you. Early in my freelance career, back when I was a technician, the folks I worked with, which became Alford Media, we had a genius in our group, and he came up with great technology. He understood some very important things about innovating in technology. One of the things we did, and if there's any geeks on here, you're looking at a 56K resistor on your screen right now, was that we figured out how to take the video projectors we used at the time, added one resistor at the right spot, and make that projector work better. And it let us make better pictures. We made fantastic pictures. It also was part of the overall improvement in the video chain that we developed over those years. So the entire video signal chain was improved. But what was special was how we did projection. We would tell anybody who asked about where to put this 56K resistor into the projector and why to do it. And people say, how did you get that great image? Let me show you. Here it is. Here's what we did. I use the same projectors you use, but I do this to it. And you would think, well, this is our secret sauce. We shouldn't be giving it away. But instead, people went, wow, I never would have thought of that. Okay. Now, our value went up. Our brand went up. If that's the kind of information that we would give away to anybody that asked, how many other things do we know? So this idea of giving away knowledge became part of our innovation. Every time we discovered something, we told people what we were doing and why it was important. And we defied the thinking of our competition. They were saying, no, video chains need to be more complicated. You need more expensive tools. And we're saying, no, you need fewer things in the line affecting the signal. You need a purer signal, and you need to find ways to make the equipment work better for you without adding another $20,000 piece of equipment, which was the norm at the time. So where do ideas come from? Okay. If you're going to make a great first impression, you're going to come up with a brilliant idea on your own instead of copying. Where do they come from? Well, you've already got them. Okay. And in the workshop next month, the strategy workshop, we're going to spend a lot of time doing strategic thinking and doing exercises about that, because we want you to uncover your secret sauce. You have a superpower, you have a quality, a resource, an idea, a position, approach, a process that's different from what your competitors do. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be a 56K resistor. It can be a small thing, but if we leverage this properly, we can get a huge strategic return from it. But first, you have to discover what that is. So instead of copying, we're going to position our secret sauce where everybody can see it, and therefore no one will successfully copy it because they don't understand everything else that went behind it. It's a manifestation of something that seems much, much more complex. So if you have a secret sauce, this quality, your team and your customers will respond to that value and want to be part of it. So don't hide it. Okay? And then once you put yourself out there, you have to continually reinforce your uniqueness, or you run the risk of someone else doing it better. And this happens on occasion. People come up with a great idea and innovation, and they won't put enough energy behind it, and somebody else will grab it and do it better. Your challenge to them is to say, I'm already doing it so well, I defy you to try and do it better. You're better off spending your time somewhere else. So instead of copying, put your position, put your secret sauce where everyone can see it, and no one's going to copy it successfully. How many times have I said this? How many times have you heard me say this? Don't let perfect get in the way of good. All right. Coming to the best decision possible is we often call this analysis paralysis. It's the overanalyzing. It's collecting too much data. It's figuring there's always a better decision to be made if we wait a little bit longer. And I tell you what, it drives me nuts. You know, when I'm working with clients, I understand having to go off and think about something and process information. But when all the data points to something and all you have to do is say yes and we can move forward, then we've wandered into this paralytic situation where you can't get out of your own way. Now, I've got a lot of stories about this, obviously. And sometimes, you know, I can't name names because that's not fair to those people because they didn't understand what they were doing. Keep calm and collect more data. So I worked with one company many, many years ago who spent years and years and years reviewing and looking at softwares, you know, ERP softwares to help run their business. In the meantime, they were using clipboards and spreadsheets and whiteboards and all the usual stuff we used back in the 90s. And every time they were just about ready to pull the trigger on a piece of software, they go, oh, wait a minute. Another piece of software is starting to get good. Maybe we should wait and see what they do. And they kept waiting for these softwares to mature. Now, back in the 90s, we probably didn't fully understand that software never finishes evolving. It's never done. Okay? Now, some of us knew that. I tried to help these folks understand that they're waiting on something that's never going to happen. They need to go ahead and choose something and learn how to use it. But instead, they went on and on and on. And I honestly, I quit keeping track after 10 years how long they had spent evaluating something and not making a decision and not committing. So they keep waiting for a better product. They didn't understand that the nature of software is progressive obsolescence. So they missed the opportunity to do something valuable for their business that would have made them more successful, made them more scalable, make it easier for them to do more business. And these are all things that they were suffering from that software would have solved. Now, for all my software fans out there, they're going, yay, tell my boss that. Well, make them watch this video. The cure for analysis paralysis, the cure for being hung up on the best decision is to face your fears. Okay? We're afraid of something. You know, a simple exercise is to write down all the things that you're afraid of could happen if you make this decision. And we do this to each other. We often, you know, if we're counseling each other, you know, we'll have that conversation. Well, tell me, what's the best that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Now, that's another way of analyzing your fears. Okay? It may not get us all the way there, but it's a start. So list all the fears, but then you also have to list the fears of not doing anything. Okay? We're looking for some balance on that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. The model I'm looking at for this is, I call it the iterative thinking process. So all the pieces to our thinking have to continuously evolve. our expectation in the software example, or our expectation of what the software is going to do for us is going to evolve. The value it will provide for us is going to evolve when we do that. How will people apply it? What resources is it going to use? How are our processes going to keep it all tied together? All of these things constantly change. And as one piece of the puzzle gets bigger or smaller, the other pieces have to adjust, because we have to keep all the pieces fitting together. So if we're evaluating an opportunity or an idea, we can't just think about the idea in a vacuum. Here's what this idea will do. Let's buy this software. It will solve all of our problems. We have to look at all the other components of it and see the plus and minus of each one of those things. Now, the net result of this is the idea is never going to be perfect, which is the whole point. All we want is 60%. That's my criteria. Some of you are saying, well, I'm more comfortable with 80%. Okay, but here's why I think 60% is important. If I have the transparency of the thinking process, if I can say, here's what we're expecting, here's what the outcome should be, here's the value to the business, here are the people involved, the stakeholders and how they're affected. If I can understand the resources that need to be committed or that I need to acquire and the processes that hold it all together, okay, then I have a process for process change. So if one of these changes, I know how to change the others because I see what the relationship of them is. Having a process for process change is how we overcome our fears, knowing that we have a way to cope with it. We're simply not going to react and figure it out. There are logical steps that we take whenever we make a decision. So you want to be prepared to make more decisions. Every decision will introduce new unknowns, and we have to explore them. But make the decision to go when you feel that you've got 60% of the questions answered. That's when you say go. If you wait any longer than that for better information, then you're back into the analysis paralysis model. For most of us who've been doing this for a while and done big strategic changes and innovations over the years, we never get to 100% on an innovation. Your best plans are never 100% implemented, and rarely do they even get to 80% implemented. So waiting for your information to be 80% good is pretty much a non-starter. Set a lower threshold for comfort. List all your fears so that you're aware of them and you're preparing for them and you're looking out for them and you're providing for those fears, because some of them are going to happen. It's like when people say, oh, don't be paranoid. People really are talking about you behind your back. That's the way process change is. Something's going to go wrong. That's part of the fun of it. So buckle up, join the ride. Here we go. Now, so we've had all the meetings. We've decided pretty much that we want to do this. We all see the 60%, but not everybody's completely on board. So what do? We schedule another meeting. We'll talk about it some more. Oh my goodness. This is not the same as analysis paralysis. Waiting for buy-in is a disease. It's a real challenge, particularly when I'm coaching executives and owners, because most of them want everybody to buy into this. They've been told you need to get buy-in from your employees. Well, yeah, that's true. Okay? But they're all waiting around for you to decide so that they can agree with you, which is not the same as buy-in. That's simply consent. Okay? They're just giving up. So settling for consensus is, like I say, it's the pill that's not going to solve your problem. It's the enemy of strategic thinking. Consensus brings us down to a common level, which is never going to be as innovative or even as successful as we want it to be. If your idea, if your strategic innovation, if your advantage doesn't make somebody in the room uncomfortable, then it's probably not cool enough to be worth doing. Okay? Learn to live with a little bit of discomfort. Consensus is cultural. Many of you have probably, you know the story of the Korean Airlines cargo plane that crashed because the co-pilot, because it was culturally undesirable for him to say anything to his captain about something that the captain did wrong, sat there while the plane crashed and the captain did the wrong thing. Now, this is fairly unique, and actually at the time this happened, Korea Airlines had the highest incident of cockpit-related accidents in the entire airline industry worldwide. And when they started looking into the problem, what they discovered was the idea of consensus, and that we all have to agree. And if we agree that the pilot is the pilot and we all work for the pilot and we can't correct the pilot, then you can make some very critical mistakes. So waiting for buy-in is a form of pilot consensus. If no one's going to tell me that I'm wrong, does that mean I'm right? Now, leadership, on the other hand, is viral. If consensus is cultural, leadership is viral. As a leader, what I'm encouraging you to do is to state your goals. Stop negotiating your goals. State your goals. We can look at the innovation in context of your goals, but your goals are non-negotiable. You're going to make people uncomfortable with your goals. You don't want consensus on your goals. You want general agreement on the innovations that are going to support your goals. Right? Be aware of the discomfort, but measure the progress that you're making. Measuring the progress helps for when you go back to people who are not comfortable with what you're doing, and you can show them, see, here's where it's working. Here's where some of your concerns were invalid. Here's where some of your concerns were valid. And you create that sort of transparency that helps them be ready for the next time this situation comes up where they're going to be uncomfortable. So somebody needs to be uncomfortable. I don't want a room full of people who are never uncomfortable with innovation. That's scary. That's, my metaphor for that is Enron. Enron was a room full of people who were not afraid of bad ideas. Right? And what they did turned out to be extremely illegal, destroyed a ton of value, ruined a lot of people's lives. You don't want a bunch of people who think the same way. I need people who are uncomfortable with what we're talking about. I need them to challenge us so that we can report back to them and show them how it works and why it should work. Now, how do we avoid this groupthink? Here's an exercise you can do with any hypothesis that you're working on, any idea you're knocking around. Go to the whiteboard, write up the hypothesis. Just write out the sentence that says, we believe that if we adopt this software platform, that we will have these benefits. Good. Now, list all the things that make that a good idea. Just keep writing until you run out of ink. Write down all the conflicts. So make one column that has good ideas in it, make one column that has conflicts. Make another column that says, what do we gain by waiting? What are the potential advantages of waiting on this thing? And then what is gained by proceeding? You've got 4 columns. Now, look at the value of your good ideas. Look at the value of the conflict. Look at the value of the waiting and the value of the proceeding, and weight them. A minor conflict has very little negative value. A major conflict would have big negative value, so give them a number. Say, this good idea is worth 1 point, but this good idea is worth 5 points. This conflict is worth -2 points, but this conflict is worth -5. Okay? Weight everything and then add it all up. Add up your columns. See where you're at. Do simple math. Okay? First grade math, kindergarten math. If you have a 60-40 ratio of points in favor of the idea, then just get started. Don't look back, commit, do it. Measure your progress, set progress goals, occasionally come back and update your hypothesis. You might even adjust your columns of information, but I think you should just discard them and start over. Adjust your plan whenever you need to and continue. You have to commit, you have to move forward. Very common thing I hear when I visit offices is, hey, Tom, we talk about doing all this stuff, but it never happens. It's usually websites. Man, we've talked about redoing our website for years, but nothing ever happens. Or we agreed to do something, and nothing ever happens. And usually they're kind of nodding over at the owner saying, well, they're not doing anything. And then when I talk to the owner, it says, well, I'm waiting for them to do it. I gave them permission and they're not doing anything. Consensus is buy-in that bypasses faith. If you wait for everybody to agree, then there's no leap of faith. Okay? If you make a leap of faith, we have to commit and we have to hold on to that faith and we have to do the things that will make it successful. Everybody has to pull together. Okay? Avoid the groupthink. Don't wait for buy-in and go. Item number 4. Yeah, this is going to get me some emails. Don't trust your gut. Gut instincts only matter when there's not enough data. Get some more data. Now, having said that, I have conversations with people all the time. We make gut decisions. I affirm gut decisions, but they're on little things. Gut decisions is, do I hire this person or that person? My gut says this person is better. I agree with your gut. Let's go. That's not the same as making a strategic choice or implementing an innovation for your business. And that's not as big. That's not going to move the needle on your company. That's just moving a small decision forward. On big decisions, do not trust your gut. Okay. I've trusted my gut before. I'll tell you a story about that and remind you why this can be very wrong. One of the books I got myself at Christmas is Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It's also a Netflix series. I don't think too much of the Netflix series. The cookbook is one of the best cookbooks I've ever read. It's fantastic. If you like to cook, I recommend it highly. You hear all the time when you watch the cooking shows, Gordon Ramsay yelling at them, did you taste it? Did you taste it? Taste, 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 taste again. What the book tells me, and the reason I chose this particular graphic from the book, is we can do something perfectly to the formula. We can follow the recipe to a T and end up with a bad result because we didn't taste. And when it comes to salt, and this particular recipe is a salt recipe, there's a lot of salt in this recipe. Not enough salt, it won't taste right. Too much salt, it won't taste right. So there's a lot of salt involved here. But if you look at the ingredients, Parmesan cheese has salt. Anchovies have a lot of salt. Well, salt has salt. Worcestershire sauce has salt. There's a lot of salt going into this product. I have to taste it at every stage to make sure that I'm keeping the right balance. And salt has different amounts of saltiness. So there's no standard for saltiness in any of these things. So you have to continually taste. Strategy is very much the same way. Okay. We need to, sprinkle this in and sprinkle that in, but then we got to check on it. My gut says that seems, oh, I think I put enough salt in. How would you know? You have to taste it. Okay. So trust your gut. When you convert anecdotes to data, you're going to lose your objectivity. So what that means is if analysis paralysis is having too much data, trusting your gut is having not enough data. And if your data is, well, somebody said, or one client called me and said this, if that's your data, then you're trusting your gut and you're going to make a huge, huge mistake. Verify that data. Taste before you salt. My salt, as most of you know, is math. There's always math to be done. There's always something you can measure. And even if the data is anecdotal, count the anecdotes. If you have one client that called and said, hey, I don't like the way that you're doing your invoices. It creates these problems for me. I think you guys need to do it differently. They might be right. And that might be a fairly easy decision to make if you have other anecdotal evidence that supports it as well. But if you call 10 other clients and say, no, there's nothing wrong with your invoices, why would you change them? Okay. If you had only listened to one person, you may have done something that might have upset all of your other clients. So even if the data is anecdotal, count the number of anecdotes. How many people? Well, this is an important client. I don't care if they're important or not. How many people are telling you that? Okay. Find something you can count before you make a decision. I was on a call with one of my clients the other day, and they had some resumes they wanted to review. They sent me 4 resumes. I scanned over them. I looked at the job they were trying to fill. I came to some objective decisions. Okay? Part of trusting your gut is get third-party objective opinions or anecdotes or another point of view or a spreadsheet or a math that's going to support that. What this client did was spot on. They didn't tell me anything about these people. I read their resumes. I made sure I understood the context of the job they were hiring for. And then I asked a few questions saying, once I made my assessment of why was this person interesting to you? Why was this person interesting? Why was this? They would have hired any of them. Okay? But they wanted an objective feedback. Their gut told them to hire candidate number 4 for a lot of very good reasons, a lot of very good subjective reasons about why they wanted to hire candidate number 4. In my objective review, not knowing any of the candidates, not having any bias about this, candidate 4 was the only one I wasn't interested in. So when I presented my role, my best candidate and why, what we discovered was they were overlooking some quantifiable evidence that said this is a better person. And part of that was their salary range. They were a very low risk investment. And the net result of this whole conversation, and what was really cool about the fact that they went to the trouble of ignoring their gut and finding somebody else to talk to about, was that we ended up choosing 2 people to hire because we could hire 2 people for just a little bit more money than we could hire one person, the one that they were choosing, and actually have a much better result, a much better solution for what they were trying to solve. It was fantastic. So those little victories like that always inspire me to say, hey, what else are we doing where our gut is getting in the way? So I'm going to pause here for a question before I get on to the last point. The question is, what if big startup costs for the new idea threaten the solvency of the entire business? There seems to be room in the process that would allow this to happen. Well, sure. If you're looking at something and one of the cons is you're risking solvency, that's a huge, huge negative. All right. So something tells me that you're out of your league. Now, here's what happens in those situations when I've been involved. Sometimes there's a person with ego or confidence or anecdotal information, the owner that says, no, I trust this idea. I think this is a good thing. I want to do this. So what are they doing? They're trusting their gut, which should be suspect. They're ignoring some of the key factors of that. What's to be gained by waiting? What's to be lost by proceeding? Okay. They're not paying attention to the conflicts. Okay. And they're probably convincing themselves. So they're doing the opposite of getting buy-in, is just believing in yourself. So yeah, of course, if something is not going to be good for the business, we need to call that out. We need to be the person in the room that introduces the conflict of that. I can't change. The one thing I can't change is entrepreneurs who believe in themselves and ignore data. I could probably do a whole 8-hour workshop on that, of the circumstances where people have made illogical decisions because they wanted to believe in what they thought, what they heard, or what they hoped would happen, and ignore good data. So thank you for the question. But go back to the process of saying, let's put this idea, let's put this hypothesis on the board and go through the list of questions about what we can do with it. Which brings me to the next point I want to make, which is stop falling in love with your ideas. Okay? We have some great ideas, and what you need is a way to get rid of them. And this may help the person who just asked that question. Sometimes a good idea is not the right one. And in order to let go of an idea, we need to know how to set it aside. Now, I've talked about this before. I know I've done some blog posts on this on more than one, probably on more than one occasion. You can have an unlimited storage for saved ideas. And there's nothing that says you can only have so many saved ideas. You just need to have a place to save them. I personally save a ton of ideas. I've got stores and stores of ideas, and blog post ideas, and strategic ideas, and marketing and branding and workshops. I come up with them all the time. I wouldn't get anything done. I barely get anything done now. I wouldn't get anything done at all if I followed every one of these ideas. I have to figure out a way to filter them and set them aside. So my filtering system works like this. Okay, I first start with only dealing with ideas that are completable. A lot of ideas are open-ended. If they're open-ended, it's a thought. I'm going to save it. I'm going to put it away. I'll come back and look at it later. Maybe I'll find a way to weave it into something. But there's nothing else for me to do with it. Write it down and move on. If it's completable, then the question becomes, is it important? With all the other things that are going on, is this actually important? And if it's important, is it actually urgent? Okay. At this point, I'm setting aside 99% of all of my ideas, because the only thing that really matters to me is, will this idea support my goals, and am I going to actually do it? The only ideas that matter are the ones you're going to actually do, but they have to pass through all of these other filters. So can it be completed? What are the resources, skills, and time, the money it's going to take to do it? Okay. Sorry, hang on. So what ideas to pursue? They need to be completable. An idea to pursue is an idea that will let another important idea happen. For instance, if the cleaning the warehouse metaphor, if I want to reorganize the warehouse, but the first thing I need to do is throw away all the junk and create some room. Okay, so throwing away junk is a great idea because it creates room for the next most important thing, which is reorganizing the warehouse. So any idea that will help another important idea happen is worth pursuing. If an idea is urgent and important, it's pursuing. If we're going to reorganize the warehouse this weekend, I better get the dumpster in by Friday. Okay? And any idea that supports your true goal. So if my true goal is I want to make my workplace reflect our brand and culture and be able to take clients through and have them see the value of our process and our attention to detail by walking through the show place of a warehouse, then cleaning your warehouse is going to support your true goal. You better get it done. Now, what to do with your saved ideas? Okay? I think we're all pretty good at figuring out how to complete an idea once we've chosen to do it. But what do we do with all these saved ideas? I put them in wherever I say them, whether it's a file, as a spreadsheet, a Google Doc of saved ideas. Sometimes I'll put keywords on them, tag them in other different ways. What are they an idea for? And then I review them every once in a while. When I'm slow, when I'm looking for ideas, I'm trying to think strategically, I'll go through my saved ideas and see if anything speaks to me. If I consider an idea 3 times and don't do anything with it, I archive it. I don't ever want to see it again. I don't want to consider it again. I want to take it off the list. I don't ever want to give it another review. It's had every opportunity to sing to me and become part of my planning. Sometimes a saved idea is attached to a milestone. Something else has to happen first. So I can save that idea, but I need to put an attachment to it. When we clean the warehouse, then we can do this. And so it becomes attached to the warehouse reorganization project, that when that project is complete, I need to consider all the ideas that got put over here into this folder called When the Warehouse is Complete. Okay. And now, same thing applies. If I go into that list after the warehouse reorganization is complete and I pass over something 3 times, get rid of it. Delete it, erase it, put it in an archive. Don't ever look at it again. Sometimes when I look through my saved ideas, I will see something and say, hey, I don't know why that was a good idea when I put it in here, but it's definitely not a good idea. I'm going to archive it. So you can reject things based on your reasoning, information you have now, the fact that you sobered up, whatever it is that makes your thinking clearer today. Get that idea out of there so it's not messing with your head. And we don't want our ideas using any of our creative energy that can be used for things that we're actually going to do. Which brings us to the whole idea of a squirrel, right? So shiny objects, rabbit holes, distractions, squirrels, we all have them. We know what we're talking about. Anybody can yell squirrel in the ballroom, and they know that somebody went off on a tangent that's not relevant to what we're doing right now. I, I've got, trust me, I got squirrels in the backyard and I got dogs at home. I see this every day. Okay. So what are we talking about here? What do we need to do? My great idea story, and I told you I'd share this and we have time, so I'll share this. Some of you have heard this before. My great idea a couple of years ago was I was going to take all of my content, catalog it in a library, make that library an online library, searchable and graphically interesting, and people could subscribe and pay to subscribe and renew and have different levels of access. And man, it was just full of brilliant ideas through and through and through and through. The problem was I fell in love with my own idea. I didn't go get information from other people. I didn't test the idea. I didn't test my assumptions. I didn't test the strategy I thought I was trying to fulfill. And the net result of it is I created a product that exactly 3 people used, and 2 of them still remind me that they wish I still had it, but it wasn't the 300 people I needed in order to make it viable. And I spent tens of thousands of dollars in development, not to mention countless hours and time in cataloging content and videos and all the stuff it takes to put all of these things and keyword it into this giant library system that, well, frankly, didn't work, was not very intuitive to use, and no one really wanted. So it was one of my best ideas. It should have been killed very early on in the process. So you need to know how to set these things aside. You need to know how to evaluate them. Is it completable? Will it let something else happen, which it didn't? Was it urgent or important? It was neither. Did it actually support my true goal? Yeah, maybe. But I never would have gotten to answer that question if I had properly evaluated the questions in front of that, because it wasn't completed on time. It used up too much resources. It was out of my skill set. It didn't allow anything else important to happen, and it wasn't urgent or important. So I just wasted a lot of time and energy. I don't want you to do the same sort of thing in your business. So stand by. I'll have a little bit more time for Q&A. Got a couple of announcements to make. Next month's webinar is how to put your ideas to work faster. This will fall on the heels of the Jumpstart workshop called Lessons in Strategy, which is March 11th through 13th. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want people to come out of that workshop and have this webinar waiting for them about how to take all the great ideas that they worked on in that workshop and make sure that they get those things moving forward faster so they don't get sucked into the whole analysis paralysis thing. So how to execute your strategy like a pro. 1 month from today, March 20th, you can probably register for that now. Jumpstart workshop. We got 4 of them this year: strategy, marketing, operations, and management. Here are the dates. You can go to the website at any time. Make sure that these are on your calendar. You don't have the excuse anymore of saying, well, I didn't know when this was going to be. I planned my vacation. No, here they are. If these topics are important to you, and operations folks, please note I put it in August for all of you who complained about it being in May last year. We listened to you. There it is. Check those things out. Now, what you need to know is that the Jumpstart workshops this year, while they're the same topics, they are not the same content. These are all new programs. We have strategic thinking exercises in the strategy workshop. A lot of them, they're going to be fun. We're going to work on uncovering innovation in your company and be able to apply that strategically, how to implement those things. We're going to talk about embracing simple but effective strategies. I found after last year that too many of you are overthinking strategy. You're working too hard on something when you already have a very effective strategy inside of your business that you just need to put a little bit more energy into it. I've got a great guest speaker coming in, Jeff Day, who was formerly of Blue Water Technology. He's a sales and branding expert. He's going to talk to us about how to find your value proposition. Many of you are struggling with that. I've had a lot of email chains going here recently since the last workshop talking about value proposition. Jeff's got a great exercise to take us through to help us find ours so that we can get on with more important things than trying to figure out why we're important to other people. It'll let you get a lot more work done once you've got that buttoned up. So I'm very excited about that. So you need to register for that right away. Go to trstimson.com/jumpstart. Follow the link. Check all the emails that are in your inbox. Every one of them has a call to action to go sign up for this. You're running out of time. We've got hotel rooms left, but not for long. All right. Make sure you're on my mailing list. I'll remind you to do a free introductory conversation. If we have not spoken before, or we haven't spoken in a long time, go to my website, click on schedule a free call now, and let's just have a quick conversation. Let's get caught up. Favorite part of my week are these conversations. And they often turn into an hour-long conversation because there's all sorts of cool stuff we can talk about. If you've got an idea or a problem or a challenge in your business, schedule a phone call. I want to talk about it. That's how I get my that's how I get my energy. That's the thing that really makes all of this worthwhile, is being able to help all of you when you have things that you need to overcome. So no sales pitch for me. Just call up. Let's have a conversation. I'd love to hear from you. Once again, thank you, our workshop sponsors. And let's see if we're going to have any questions coming up here at all. And another fire hose day. Thank you, Tom. All right. Question here about creating discomfort. Often the person that's most uncomfortable when we talk about these things is the owner. Is there any way to overcome that? Well, you're not alone. Very often, we're in an entrepreneurial industry. So many of the books, the books on my shelves, all the business books are about large corporations, Fortune 100 companies, multinational national manufacturing companies. There's not enough training and information for people who run normal everyday businesses, which is 99% of the companies out there. So I deal with a lot of uncomfortable owners, and it's that fear thing. So we have to understand what their fear is. So what I generally recommend, if I'm working with managers who my client is that uncomfortable owner, is to go through the exercise. Take the template, talking about what's the best that can happen, what's the worst that can happen, what are the upsides, and listen to their words and mirror their words. And very often you'll say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and trust me, this is probably the problem, what I'm hearing you say is you're not confident that we're going to execute and that we're going to rely too much on you in order to make this happen. Try that one out, because very often I find that that's that entrepreneur's concern, is they're tired, they're burned out, they need you to pull the weight, and they're not confident that you're going to do that. So thank you for that question. So just consider that, go through the exercise, and say, hey, really, what is your concern? What's the worst that can happen here? Okay. Another question here. How many inputs, direct reports do you use in a strategy team? If you're the GM of an AV company and you're strategizing in the next 2 quarters? Well, okay. So how long is a piece of string question? Because it really depends on the size of the organization. So staffing a strategy team, I am looking for, typically if I'm running a strategy session, I don't want really any more than 8 people in there. Just because that's the practical number that we can have a conversation without people getting buried in it. And as somebody who facilitates conversations, that's a good number for me. However, in an individual organization, there may be 12 of those people, or there may only be 4. So we have to take a look at those situations. And then we adjust how we do the facilitation or how we talk about strategy depending on the size. So if it's a bigger group, we'll do more group exercises. We'll break into 2 or 3 teams and have them come back and do stuff, kind of like we'll do in the workshop. I've got some some companies are bringing 6 or 8 people to the workshop. We're going to probably have them break into 2 teams, because in a short exercise, 3 people can get a lot more done than 6 can. So that's the good question. Now, the other question that's hidden in that is, where are they on the org chart? And that's the more delicate question. I have been involved in strategic planning where the new guy who is hired to run the warehouse, who doesn't know anything about the company, is invited to strategic planning because, 1, they were hired because they were clever, and 2, they're objective. So I want to sprinkle people in from throughout the organization, not just managers. I want people who will speak truth to power, because I've been in the strategic planning sessions where the CEO and the senior vice presidents are all in the room, and the managers, who are probably the ones who have to implement this, don't get a voice. They're afraid to speak up because their bosses and their bosses' bosses are all there. So mixing it up for me is also very good. It doesn't have to be all of the top management of the company, but it needs to be a team that can contribute at a strategic thinking level. So I hope that was an adequate answer. That's a big, big question. All right, some final thoughts here. I talk about all the books on my bookshelf, and I will tell anybody who asks and say, hey, Tom, have you read Good to Great? Well, yeah, I did. I read it 20 years ago. I'll never read it again. Or what about this book? That's a great author. Have you read Michael Porter? I don't read a lot of other people's books because I find that it takes away from my originality. I went to school, got an MBA, learned a whole bunch of stuff so that I could think for myself and not be derivative. So when you're thinking about innovation, don't copy, don't be derivative, be original. And even though if you come up with the same idea somebody else did, but you did it without knowing that they did that, without copying them, it's an original idea. Okay? You're not constrained by how they did it. You're not even influenced by how they did it because you don't know about that. Now, that's not an argument for ignoring what your competition is doing. Okay? That's an argument for following original ideas and give yourself some space to be creative. Don't overthink. Goodness, please, folks, don't overthink. Pull the trigger on stuff. Most of you are reactive anyway. We react to stuff all day long. We know how to solve problems once a problem is created. Don't wait for a strategic initiative that is problem-free because you're never going to get it. Don't look behind you, but say where you're going. If you're the leader, don't look to see who's following you. Just go. I've had a couple of sessions already this year where my directive to the owner of the company was for them to stand up in front of the audience and say in no uncertain terms, this is what we're going to do. We're going to grow the business. We're going to make more money. We're going to change things along the way. It's going to make some of you uncomfortable, okay? But it's not up for negotiation. All right, so don't look behind you. Say where you're going and just start going. And yes, you're going to lose a few people on the way. The point is not to lose them. The point is they're going to disconnect and they're going to lose themselves. Don't let your employees hold you back. Don't let your employees hold you ransom. Don't let old ideas keep you from doing what's right and what you should be doing. Trust your data more than your gut. If you're working from the gut, go get some more data. It's not that hard. There's lots of things you can measure, lots of lists you can make that help reinforce what you think your gut is telling you. And then finally, just don't fall in love with your ideas. I'll tell you one last story. My oldest daughter is a wonderful writer, and she had a great teacher in upper elementary school, so probably 5th or 6th grade. And this teacher is now a very well-known writer who's created quite a business for herself, teaching other people how to write. But she had a great piece of advice that she shared with us at a parent-teacher conference about deleting your favorite sentence. And whenever you're writing something and you're struggling to get the words right, and you keep rearranging things and you keep writing new sentences, but you hang on to one sentence because you love it, it's so perfectly worded, it says everything you need that sentence to say, that's the problem. Delete it. The thing that you're protecting is the thing that's keeping you from letting better ideas come out. She goes, delete that sentence. Don't just cut and paste it and put it somewhere else. She says the only thing that works is to simply delete it and then start writing again, because now you're not working around that sentence. Now you're not modifying your ideas so that that sentence can still be there. We do the same thing in our businesses when we're looking at tactics and innovations and strategies. We fall in love with something, we hang on to it, and we make everything else compromise to what this particular idea requires. And that's what holds you back. Find the things that are holding you back and delete them and come up with better ideas. So look into the workshop for next month, Lessons in Strategy. We're going to have a lot of fun. I've been working on the content, and I'm very excited about all the things that we're going to do, and I get to share with you in the exercises that you're going to get to participate in. I'm very excited about how many people have committed to come in large groups. I think this will be my first 8 attendees for one company. We had 6 at the workshop last December. Now we've got a company that's bringing 8. Learning together, particularly when it comes to things like strategic thinking, is extremely important. So That's it. That's all I've got. I can't thank you guys enough for joining us. The recording will be up probably later today. You'll get an email tomorrow that tell you how to get to it. Thank you for participating. Share it with your friends, and we'll see you around the corner. Have a great rest of your week.